Hello, LinkedIn Live. How are you doing? Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday, Sal.
Happy Friday, Cheryl.
I don't know whether that's a greeting that you tend to use. I know some
Never,
people find it a bit
absolutely
cheesy.
never.
Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining me, Sal, and thank you to everybody that's tuning in. I know that quite a few people were keenly waiting for this one, along with some of the colleagues that I've literally just been speaking to on a call. So thank you for joining us. Joining me today in this week's Inclusion Talks is Sal Nassim. Now, Sal, obviously, if you're on the platform, you're on LinkedIn, you're watching this, you can go and check out Sal's bio. It's pretty impressive. So it might, leave you feeling a little bit inadequate. And Sal is also, if you want to go and check out some of Sal's posts, Sal is the man that has had numerous, I don't know what you call them, viral posts or whatever. Sal talks about all sorts of things, but one of the things that I love that Sal does is Sal talks about his faith. Which is actually quite refreshing for LinkedIn. I think I spotted you on LinkedIn, Sal, maybe like 18 months, a couple of years ago, potentially. And I just really loved what you were putting out there. I loved, the way that you thought about things. And I reached out, and we sort of connected in that way. And then obviously you were kind enough to be a judge as part of the Black Talent Award. So please do check out Sal's profile if you're kind of interested in just thinking differently and human connection and all of those sorts of things. So welcome, Sal.
Well, thank you for having me, Cheryl. Thank you for such a generous introduction. Don't think I quite deserved that much, but thank you. Really
So
appreciate it.
you can pay me later. It's fine. So, so today when I reached out to Sal, as I say, Sal, you've been putting out quite a lot of stuff about sort of like faith and how you're feeling. And do you want to maybe just explain as to maybe how we came up with this as a topic and why you felt that this was something that was worth talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me, I noticed the gap, um, particularly on LinkedIn. It's all about, I'm professional, and what does professional mean? For me, faith is intrinsic to that, and yet, as a Muslim, you don't really see many Muslims talk about their faith openly.
Mm.
The reason being, it's difficult. It's having the confidence to do that. So I kind of started to fill the vacuum I thought existed in LinkedIn
Yeah.
by speaking about it, and it's been very much a journey for me. Sorry, that cliche. You should play that song "Journey" whenever you hear that. But
Or
um,
sing it,
or
maybe.
sing it if you're really desperate. But I started to fill that vacuum,
Yeah.
because others wanted to kind of encourage others to do that as well. And I've kind of just done that more and more to the point where um, my point about faith inclusion, obviously starting off my personal perspective of my own
Yeah.
faith, was featured as one of the kind of big ideas by LinkedIn for the
Yeah.
coming year. So there's definitely something in it. And recently I did a post about code switching and what it meant for me personally, and I think we'll probably get into that, Cheryl. So
Mhm.
for me, it's been very much about well, this is me as a professional. I can't separate my faith. Well, I'm going to represent that on this platform as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was and I remember I think it was the post that you're referring to. Was it the code switching one that got featured by LinkedIn News? Was
Um,
it that? It was, yeah.
there was one. It's that Andy Warhol moment, isn't it? When you go
Yeah.
viral, everybody says it. Yeah, I'm not bothered about going viral, but we really are. We really are if we're honest about it. We are. And it was the most unexpected way. It was during Ramadan, so I was fasting. When I'm fasting, I tended to wear thobes more. Thobe is like a kind of traditional Arabic garment that men wear, kind of
Mm.
long to the ground. And I wore that home, but I'd never ever worn it in a meeting. I wasn't going into the office, but we were
Mm.
doing Teams calls all day. I thought, today I'm going to do it. I'm just going to turn up in it, because that's what I wear. People go cash. This was me being cash, and I did it. And I did a post about it, just saying I'm a bit nervous, but I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And it went viral. It went crazy. It went
Mm.
had millions of views. People all around the world started kind of um, kind of not copying, but kind of embracing what I'd done and doing it for themselves, their own cultural wear. It was a beautiful thing. I got
Yeah.
featured on LinkedIn News, and the BBC even interviewed me. So it was a really beautiful and
Yeah,
surreal experience.
yeah. And was that the post of you in the green Thor? In the green one? In the green, was it green?
Um,
Was it
I
creamy
think it's
one?
grey, but it might come
Yeah,
across green
grey.
depending on
Yeah.
the text line. Yeah, so it's a big long one. I'm doing a semi-religious pose. I don't know why I did that pose. I don't know why I did that
Were
pose.
you just hamming it up? Excuse the pun, but you know.
I don't know. I just thought, well, look, this is me. I suppose that's what I was kind
Yeah,
of doing. This is
yeah,
me, and
absolutely.
yeah,
Mm,
it ended up going quite big.
great.
Yeah.
It's great. And do you know what's really interesting in terms of this topic, and we'll get into the nuances of kind of what we mean by code switching. But what's interesting about this topic, and thanks, Rosalina, for your comment. But there is something about, even in the world of inclusion and diversity and equity, freedom around religious belief isn't actually often talked about or even trained out that much. Really, it's kind of, in the same way, in the UK there are 9 sort of protected characteristics or groups, as people know. And actually, that freedom of religious belief and expression and thought isn't often covered as much as some of the other ones, like gender, race, disability, etc. So really pleased that we're having this conversation. I wanted to start off by throwing in a couple of stats as well about religion, and I put a post out about this earlier in the week. So I was kind of trying to get my head around. I was like bringing facts and evidence into the conversation, because we're sort of full of conspiracy theories, and not all of our conversations are as evidence based. So I always like to throw it in if I can. So I posted about this earlier in the week. So how religious are we, certainly in England and Wales? So when you look at the census for 2021 compared to 2011, would you believe that 46% of people reported themselves as being Christian? So nearly half of people. Now, whether or not that means people are practicing or out and out, although there is a really fascinating report actually by an organisation called Pern Condola. So Binner Condola, if you know of him, is a really sort of like eminent D&I consultant, and he did a report around Christianity at work and also Hinduism at work. So nearly half of people reported as being Christian. The next one then is no religion. So people that have no religion was 37%, and that was an increase on the previous census. And then the next largest group was Muslim, and that was, what percentage that was, Sal? Just as a rough guess, what percentage of the UK are Muslim? Do you know? I'm putting you on the spot now.
You are. I think it was about 2.9%.
It's, well, in England and Wales, it's 6.5%.
It's growing. It's growing.
It's bigger. It's nearly 4 million. And then the next one after that is Hindu, which is 1.7%. And then we've got Sikhism, which is 0.9%. That's 500,000. And then Jewish 0.5%, Buddhist 0.5%. So that's kind of how it breaks down. So, we are still a fairly sort of like religious country, at least in terms of how people report, even if they're not practicing. I wanted to delve into the code switching piece and get quite specific, because I know when you made the post about the code switching, you said that there were ways that you recognize that you code switch. Do you want to just go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Would it be helpful for me to explain what I understand code switching to be?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah,
I did look up the technical definition, so I've
okay.
got it here. So technical definition is the process of shifting from one linguistic code to another,
Mhm,
depending on either the social set or the conversational setting. So that's the technical kind of definition
mhm,
of it. But obviously, when we're talking about minorities and ethnic minorities, we understand it to be slightly different as well.
mhm.
It goes kind of almost broader
Yeah.
than that. Well, I had this kind of real epiphany that obviously the code switching thing, we all do it to a certain extent because of the cultural stuff. But from a faith perspective, when I'm at home, I'll kind of remember God daily, many times, and the language that I use. So I'll say like inshallah, God willing, or Bismillah or mashallah. So it's just part of my language. It's part of my lexicon.
Mm.
And I realized, one day that when I go to work, just like that, it goes, all of that stuff goes, which naturally trips off my tongue. So in a work setting, um, my code switching is like on on a switch. So from the point, like might be speaking to my kids,
Mm.
to the point I switch my laptop on, it totally switches because I'm removing that entire kind of thread which is embedded in my natural language. Now,
Mm.
um, I hadn't realized that, and I'm a middle-aged man. I'm a middle-aged man that just had this epiphany that look at the level of switching that I'm having to do,
Yeah.
uh, and it's always just been a thing that I've done. And when I put that post out, many people actually said they do the very same thing. Now,
Mm.
I'm centering it on my own experiences of this,
Mm.
but I'm sure it was broader. I'm sure it will go broader to other people of faith who
Yeah.
do the very same thing from their own faith perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to what you said there, there's that quite technical, maybe even narrow definition of code switching, which is about the linguistics. But actually, I think we tend to think of it more in terms of language and behaviors, and potentially even what you wear, all of those sorts of things in terms of how we switch from being, maybe what we would do out, as you say, at home or outside of work, to then we put on almost this office persona, in work. And the report that I referred into, it literally only came out in December. After this, I'll maybe put a link to it when this is posted. So it's about Christianity at work and Hinduism. And in terms of Christianity, I hope I get this statistic right, but it was something like 82% of Christians said that they, refrained from, for example, wearing a symbol of their faith. So maybe would refrain from wearing a cross to work, even though they would like to, so they would maybe take it off when they're at work, but they would wear it afterwards, which I thought was interesting. So I think you're right. I think there are probably people of, sort of numerous faiths that kind of hide these elements of who they are.
And I was thinking about it like, why? Why have I always done that? And I think the place I got to, Cheryl, was safety.
Hmm.
It's a safety mechanism.
Yeah.
It's a self-preservation thing. How could I bring that to a working environment where the vast majority of my career I've been the only person that's looked like me in teams, and directorates and positions that I've
Mm.
held. How could I easily bring that? And um, obviously, the reason we code switch is to feel to fit in.
Yeah.
That's the kind of that's why we do it. But why was I doing it? And
Mm.
then I was thinking about it, and yeah, it was that whole kind of conversation with yourself about kind of being quite harsh. Well, why do I do it? And it kind of makes you feel bad. It does. It makes you feel you question yourself a bit, but then the reality is when you're a minority, um, and you work in the environments that you do, um, who else does it? No, I've never heard in my kind of in a professional setting anybody just going to be have that ease
Yeah.
and to use that sort of language. It's about safety, but
Yeah.
I kind of put that post out into the LinkedIn universe to see what everybody else thought because I didn't know
Yeah.
what the right answer was
Yeah.
as to doing that code switching.
Yeah, and that would be an interesting question. And for all the people that are listening, I would be interested in those thoughts. I mean, Artie sort of said, that it is about self preservation or self reservation. Maybe I think there is definitely an element of that. I want to fit in. I don't want to stand out. So maybe we do those sorts of things. But it is interesting. I think specifically to your example of code switching in terms of using terms like, for example, inshallah, which I think I got in touch with you to say, I messaged you privately. My daughter says this all the time. I think it's as a result of, so she went to a very multicultural university. So even though, she grew up in Shropshire, which is where we live now. So I'm originally from Birmingham, so very multicultural. But we then, we sort of moved out to the sticks. So she grew up here, which is a very, sort of like, minorities kind of, do stand out. But when she went to university in Birmingham, and it was Birmingham City University, very, very diverse. She would hear it all the time, and some of her friends, were Muslim as well. And because I said to her after your post, I said to her, "Why do you use that term?" She uses it all the time. I said, "Why do you use it?" And she said, "Oh, I just hear my friends saying it, so I just started googling it." And she uses, all of the terms, all of those common terms probably that you use. She uses them just on a daily basis. Denise, hi, Denise. So Denise has chimed in, say, we don't want to stand out. That's why we code switch. So it's do you think that there's a right or wrong about it, Sal? What do you think? Do you and have you, so since you created that post, for example, have you started using that terminology at all more, in work spaces, whether that's virtual or in the real?
I think I talk about my faith much more than I ever
Mm-hmm.
used to. So in a work setting, I mean, I had the blessing of going on Umrah, which is a religious pilgrimage, over
Mm-hmm.
the Christmas break, and I spoke about it.
Yeah.
In the past, I wouldn't have. In the past, I would have hidden that part of me.
Yeah.
So whilst, I haven't kind of necessarily got my head round about the language point,
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more kind of um, confident about just talking about my faith, because that's a key part of me. I can't kind of box that off. What did you do at the weekend? Well, it'll naturally involve some element of it, much like, I've got friends that are really involved in churches, so they'll talk about the church and, the activities and things that kind of came off the back of that. So for me, it's having just a bit more um, confidence now, he says, reaching his middle age, um, to just be open about it, to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, to use um, this kind of self-reflection to be a bit to be a bit braver
Yeah.
and actually not care that there might be a bit of judgment, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. It's interesting. So somebody else that's tuning in has said, "Yes, I always say inshallah. I have picked this up from my Arab fiance, but I wouldn't say this at work either."
That's really interesting. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
And then someone else, Mariam, hi Mariam, has said, "I often catch myself translating these words as well." So does that? I wonder if Mariam's saying that she maybe thinks it in her head, so inshallah, and maybe translates it. So, Mariam, does that mean that you would say something and then say, God willing, maybe, maybe you translate it that? Because that's the other way. Because I was thinking about it as you were saying it, Sal, in terms of, is it that maybe you wouldn't say that terminology because of the person that you're talking to? As in, well, would that person even understand what I mean if I use that phrase? So it's interesting. I wonder whether Mariam is almost doing that translation then for the person that's hearing it. So what you're almost doing is you're still expressing that part of you, because when you maybe put something out there or you say something, you want to acknowledge with specifically, say for example with inshallah, you want to acknowledge that you recognize that according to your faith things are done, if they're in God's will to be done, but then you translate it to the person that's hearing it so that they get that as well. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's a bridge, maybe. Yeah.
What my compromise is, I think, what Mariam is talking about, which is I actually say it in English. So if I say inshallah at home, I actually say God willing. So I'm comfortable enough
Yeah.
to say that. So that's the way I've been able to just
Yeah.
kind of square it off for myself.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's just been the way that I've kind of got around it.
Yeah.
I think the bigger point for me, kind of on this stuff, Cheryl,
Mm.
is that you said it at the start, which is around the work around DEI or EDI, whatever you prefer the acronym. Where does faith inclusion come into it? For me,
Yeah.
faith inclusion is like the Cinderella of the EDI world. It's kind of locked up in the attic, you know. Um, it doesn't really get a good look in. It
Yeah.
doesn't,
Yeah.
except I think for the largely performative gestures every time you get Vaisakhi or Ramadan. or the various kind of significant religious festivals, you'll get the shop front window of the posts
Yeah.
and kind of hit at that time. But where is it in the rest of the rest of the work on inclusion?
Yeah.
I don't see.
Why do you think? I've got a theory as to why I think that is. Why do you think that is?
I want to hear your theory first.
I shouldn't have said that had a theory then, should I? Um, it is a tricky one. I've got a few. What's really interesting. So first of all, because we're in veganuary or veganuary, however you pronounce it, obviously, many people are now aware that. And just to clarify, some because I've heard this in organisations now. Some clients are saying, "Oh goodness me, even veganism now is a protected characteristic." So what's happened over the last couple of years? Ethical veganism, which tends to be, people that have very strong beliefs about, animal welfare and the rights of animals, and live a whole lifestyle around a philosophical belief, has also become a protected belief, in terms of freedom of religious thought and belief. Um, and veganism perhaps is one of the slightly less, if I say in quote unquote, contentious views. But I think why faith sometimes is shied away from a DE&I perspective, and I say this as somebody who has had experience of delivering sessions where, for example, in say Pride Month, because I think this is often where it comes up. So you're delivering a session in Pride Month, and it's really interesting. We were sort of doing work in sort of breakout groups, and somebody from a Christian faith actually expressed the view that she felt uncomfortable that she could still almost like express her beliefs and faith during Pride Month. And I think it comes from a place of she felt that potentially there is a conflict between, and we sort of talked about it. It was good. It was a good conversation, and we left in a very positive way. But almost, if there is a sense or a fear that there is a conflict between the rights of one protected group to hold a certain belief and another protected group in terms of their rights or their belief about their rights. And I do wonder whether that might be some of the reason that we shy away from, what appeared to be kind of like scary conversations, or do you know what I mean? I don't know. That's kind of my theory. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sel.
I think you've expressed it. You've expressed it better than I could. I think it's in the too hard box, personally,
Yeah.
for the reasons that you've described, Cheryl. But and I think it's consistently overlooked when you're talking about inclusion,
Mm,
and you kind of gave those stats at the beginning. You know, you're talking about creating a place of psychological safety, because for people to talk about their faith, we're talking in the context of minorities a lot of the time as well.
mm,
Um, and for them to talk about their faith means them being themselves. That word authenticity.
mm,
But for somebody who isn't a minority to bring themselves to work, including their faith, is one thing. For somebody who's a minority and to bring themselves to work, which includes their faith, is a different thing as well, because it is so much harder and there's so many more
yeah.
layers that they have to
Yeah.
go through. So then when I say these two things, there's lots of intersection and lots of overlap
Yeah.
things. And I think the reason why it has got so little attention is because it's difficult.
Mm,
And you described a scenario there
mm,
which required, um, you know, um, a sensible, mature, nuanced conversation
yeah.
about a difficult um, area where there could be rubbing points. There
Yeah.
could be. And how do you deal with it and how do you handle it? Well, it's much easier if you just keep that from home.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think, yeah, and Mariam has sort of chimed in as well. So I think it sort of resonates. It is in the hard to do box. I definitely think from a a sort of DE&I practitioner's perspective, I think maybe they have seen it as to be too hard. And I would encourage all of my fellow DE&I practitioners to just, let's kind of get more, let's lean into this, as they say. Let's lean into it. Let's do the homework. Let's read the reports. Let's have conversations with people like Sal. and let's lean into it. And the other thing I would say as well, actually, there's a great book. You know that I'm a book nerd, right? I hope you're coming to book club next month. I need to send you the dates on that. But there is a great book, which is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. But it talks very much about how we can, still have conversations and, get along and have mutual respect and all of those sorts of things when we have different beliefs, which is kind of that's what civilized societies do, right? We have different views of, we have different thoughts, different beliefs, different views, and we still live side by side. We work together and we still get along. So for me, the ultimate is, we should be able to be ourselves, because in a civilized society, you can have different perspectives and still get along and work together productively and still be, sort of colleagues and all of that sort of thing.
You've said it really well there, Cheryl. I think my view is that when you're talking about faith and you're talking about all the different protected characteristics and
Yeah.
all these areas of, DEI, by bringing faith into it, doesn't have to be at the cost of anything else.
Yeah.
It can sit side by side, and anybody that wants to bring faith into it and then to bring it into a different area at the cost or expense of
Yeah.
somebody else has a different belief, that needs to be called out. That
Yeah.
absolutely needs to be called out. I have some amazing connections on LinkedIn, people of different ethnicity, different faith, different beliefs,
Yeah.
the whole thing. And they're some of the most amazing, productive conversations. So if I'm bringing my faith into it, I'm not I'm not trying to take something from them. And I think when we're looking at bringing faith inclusion into the mix, whatever your
Mm.
faith is, it needs to be seen by organizations as not a problem. We're just trying to bring a part of ourselves into a professional setting that is
Yeah.
actually part of our DNA.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to do it by trying to reclaim ground from somebody else
Yeah.
or take something from somebody else. Sometimes there's too much fear, which is all about, well, what is this going to be at the cost of?
Yeah.
And what I'm going to say is it's cost neutral. Actually, it's just going to be benefit
The
to
benefit. Yeah.
organizations where
Yeah.
people feel that they can actually just bring that little bit of themselves, and it's just good for our souls
Yeah.
if we can do that.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap things up shortly, but my final question really is just like on a practical level. How would you encourage individuals and organizations to, to do more to kind of get authenticity in the workplace when it comes to faith and religious belief?
I think I'm going to push this at an organizational level, because I think for individuals to do it without feeling some psychological safety sharing, it's at
Hmm.
risk. It's at a personal level of risk and at a personal cost. And let's be honest, some organizations have really good inclusive cultures and they're
Hmm.
progressive. Others are stuck in the 80s,
Yeah.
which means that organizations need to start thinking about faith as part of their EDI, DEI commitments. They
Mm.
need to think, when they're talking about an inclusive environment, they need to think about, as you've said it, all 9 protected
Yeah.
characteristics. It can't be selective. It can't be a competition between them. It needs to be, a true rounded picture. And
Mm.
when organizations do the work, then people will feel more able to bring that kind of part of themselves to the professional settings, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something that's made me think, in terms of even in the work that I do, as to whether I'm giving it enough weight, because we are just so used to giving the other one's weight. So definitely from my perspective, if I'm going to be working with anybody anytime soon that's watching, be aware to be seeing the conversation about religion and faith, because definitely an important one. Okay, we are going to leave it there, Sal. So, Sal, thank you so very much for joining us. If people want to connect with you, where's the best place? Is it just LinkedIn? Is that where you live in terms of
LinkedIn.
online social media?
I spend far too much time on LinkedIn. You'll always find me.
Definitely. And I will say, and thank you to everyone for joining us. I know not everyone pipes up, but this was a really popular one. But I will say, genuinely, if you're looking for some inspiration and, you know, different types of thinking, just like on a human level, you know, definitely tune into what Sal is putting out there, because it's pretty special. You know, definitely one of my favorite posters on LinkedIn. So thank you so much, Sal. And you know, as Sal said, you know, Fridays and Mondays, I think is always a good time to actually show some of that authenticity. So when, you know, when you ask your colleagues, what are you doing at the weekend, or, you know, on Monday when you say, what did you do at the weekend, you know, I would encourage everyone to maybe share some of that, you know, some of the faith element of that. You know, don't shy away from it so much. So yeah, it just leaves me to say, Sal, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cheryl.
You're welcome. All right, we're out of here. Everyone have a peaceful and restful weekend. Go with grace.